along with the QR code. And then also the menu for tonight, for this afternoon is in there as well as the agenda. Just real quick, a special thanks to Andy from the cast team in the back. He has made this event look so much better and so flawless and seamless. So thank you, Andy. Chef Charlie, who worked with me on the pairings, amazing, so astute on food and wine. It's been a pleasure. Austin Hope team, CJ, Joe, and Kim, and Austin Hope himself. Hey guys, I didn't see you guys there. J. Lohr team, Joshua. He has been fantastic. He's been pushing this event. We have Linda, as she walks in, from the Cab Collective. Linda has been the executive director of Cab Collective for the last 10 years, really has put a huge spotlight on Bordeaux in Paso. Wes Hagen, he is going to lead us through the seminar, one of the most prolific minds on wine in this industry. Team LXV, everybody at the LXV team, thank you so much for relentlessly working to make this happen. A special thanks to all of our panelists who are going to follow the seminar, Michael Mooney, Stacy, and did I see Steve walk in? Steve Peck? Oh, there you go. Hi, Steve. So they're going to do a short panel following the seminar. Last but not the least, our media, thank you so much. I'm glad you're here after a rough night last night. And all of you, thank you for being here, making this day happen. This is a big deal for us. So the way it's going to work today, we are going to do the seminar with the 6 wines. As Wes explained, the wine in your glass is the first wine that we're going to be tasting, the first region. But that's okay if you drink and you sip, because we have more of it. And as he goes through every region, we will be pouring that wine for you. Once. Yes. It is going to be a quick turnaround because we have a lot to achieve and drink. In your folder, there is information on the agenda, but just to give you a quick rundown, seminar, panel, grand tasting. If you have any questions, we all here, please feel free. We would really appreciate if you post anything on your social media, please hashtag CabFrancDay Paso. CabFranc Day Paso. Welcome to our very first CabFranc Day celebration. Thank you so much for being here.
Ladies and gentlemen, the indefatigable Nita Mittal. It would not have happened without her, and she is an amazing, amazing taskmaster. My name is Wes Hagen. I will be your host today. I am a winemaker, wine educator, AVA petitioner from Santa Barbara County. So I feel a little conflicted today. 30 years in Santa Barbara wine, here I am in Paso saying stuff like, you guys are such better collaborators. You have such a better culture happening right now. And I was always wondering why people drove right by Santa Barbara to come up to a hotter, further place. I'm starting to understand why. So congratulations on the culture here. You've made me feel welcome, and I'm absolutely in love with Paso Robles wine. So a lot of people today have been asking me why Cardinal Richelieu? Well, Cardinal Richelieu was a 17th century minister in France under King Louis XIII. He consolidated power in France, and he was a absolutely brutal and efficient man that worked behind the scenes of both the papacy and the French king. He was a lot like Cab Franc. He kept things moving in the middle of France in the same way that Cab Franc keeps moving in a Bordeaux blend. He was specifically the acidity and maybe a little bit of the complexity of the French culture at the time. So we'll talk a little bit, and why today? December 4th is the anniversary of Cardinal Richelieu's death. And if you were the Three Musketeers, thank you, Alexandre Dumas, of course you would say, good, he's dead, because he was the bad guy in the Three Musketeers. And if you were a Huguenot, you probably wouldn't like him very much anyways. But we love Cardinal Richelieu today because, as we'll find out, he is responsible for bringing Cabernet Franc to the Loire Valley. You can see a couple of my favorite quotes from Jancis Robinson. She's not a huge enthusiast of sexual stereotyping of wines, but even I can see that Cabernet Franc might be described as the feminine side of Cabernet Sauvignon. It's subtly fragrant and gently flirtatious, rather than massively muscular and tough. Because Cab Sauv has so much more of everything: body, tannin, alcohol, color. It's often supposed to be necessarily superior, but I have a very soft spot indeed for its more charming and more aromatic relative. Cabernet Franc kind of reminds me of Cabernet Sauvignon is a lot like heavy metal, 3 notes played over and over so loud you have to pay attention. Cabernet Franc maybe a little bit more jazzy, a little bit more complex as the moment moves on in our glass. In addition to the 100% versions I made for Stephen Kent, Cab Franc is an indispensable part of the blend of my flagship brand, natural blending partner in Bordeaux. In my wine, Cab Franc is the id. So the id is the desire. The ego is how we picture the desire. The superego is a societally accessible way to go ahead and get what you desire. So id is desire. So hopefully, relentlessly and lubriciously, I like that word, I'm going to put that back into my vocabulary, driving flavors and aroma and structure forward to a very long conclusion. So I thought it would be nice to hear from a Brit and hear from someone who's been working with Cab Franc just about as long as any winemaker. And of course, the Mirasou's, 8th generation winemaking in California? 6. Thank you, 6. Very well done. I might as well go on the other side. So if I see Steven, he's like, did you say we were only 6? It's true. So a couple things about Cab Franc that you might know. It was first developed in the Basque region of Spain, a hybridization of 2 grapes, Moranoa and Hondarribia Belza, parent grape to Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Carmenere. So hey, no Cabernet Franc. Cabernet Franc really is one of the foundational grapes of French winemaking and European winemaking for that matter. The Bordelais suggests Cab Franc has a little less color intensity than Cab Sauv. It's going to add aromatic intensity, raspberries, notes of violets, and spices. Tends to make superior wine in areas just a touch cooler than the greatest regions for Cabernet Sauvignon. I would say that's true for Santa Barbara County in my 30 years of winemaking experience there. I find that I'm much more excited about a Cabernet Franc coming out of San Ynez Valley in general than a Cabernet Sauvignon, although that's changing a little bit in Happy Canyon. And then viticulturally, Cabernet Franc loves that gravel, limestone, sand, and clay that you can find generally on the left bank and in some areas in the right bank and in the Entre du Mer. 65,000 hectares are planted worldwide. If you want to do math, that's 160,000 acres of Cabernet Franc. The Lohr Valley, Bordeaux, Santa Barbara, British Columbia, East Coast of the US, Central Coast, Paso Robles, Hungary, South America, Chile, as well as some places in Argentina also are well known for making Cab Franc. Very important date. So in 1831, our friend Jean-Louis arrived in Los Angeles and quickly recognized the potential for French varietal wine grapes to thrive in the arid Mediterranean climate. Unfortunately, all that was there was the mission grape, Lista Prieto, which is a grapevine that Father Junipero Cerro brought, and the mother vine being at the San Gabriel Mission. And then at the end of the 18th century, the grapes available at the time, just Mission, were brought to Alta California by the Franciscan brothers. They grew well and they made a lot of wine, but it wasn't all that great. And our friend Jean-Louis was not satisfied. He imported better grapes from Bordeaux. He did not bring Cab Sauv. He brought Cab Franc. And Los Angeles was the first place in the New World that successful vinifera production occurred in the New World. Sure, there were grapes in New Mexico 500 years before, but as far as quality vinifera wines, Los Angeles is the first city in the New World. And when Anaheim's disease, otherwise known as Pierce's disease, took over, it happened to happen at the exact same time as they found gold at Sutter's Mill. So all the smart money went away from Los Angeles and the disease to where the money was, which is up north where the gold is. And that's how the grapes kind of moved from Southern California to another. Although in Napa, they don't really like the story that a lot of their original cuttings came from Los Angeles. But, we won't have to go into that. And then the wine industry headed north, as I said, where the smart money was heading to Northern California in the gold rush. Cabernet Franc, this is a beautiful sort of a visual provided by Wine Folly, one of my favorite sources. Again, if you're interested in this presentation, we're happy to send it to you. Just get our email afterwards. But you can see that strawberry, red plum with a little bit of that roasted pepper, crushed gravel, and maybe a little pyrazine, depending on the canopy management. Obviously, pyrazine content is going to be reduced by proper canopy management, sun flecking in the canopy. So you can really kind of fine tune a lot of these flavors by virtue of how the grapes are grown, the region where they're grown, and of course, what really matters, the microclimate, basically the area in the fruit zone on every vine, which is really where wine is made. You can see that it's also listed as medium fruit, medium body, medium to high tannin, medium high acidity, and medium alcohol on that 4-point scale. We've got a cluster, so we can see obviously the leaf architecture and the cluster architecture give us a good hint that if we see, first of all, a grapevine that has sort of the tight amphore-looking sinus on the bottom, and the keyholes in the leaf architecture scream, hello, I'm a Bordeaux varietal. One thing that I would look for on the cluster is, as I'll show you in the next slide, I kind of tend to see that Cab Franc tends to be a little plumper, a little less thin, and the shoulders tend to be a little more robust. As you can see, same artist, very similar. Remember, no Cab Franc, no Cabernet Sauvignon, because Cab Franc is one of the father progenitor grapes of Cabernet Sauvignon. You can see a little bit of difference in the cluster architecture. This representation of the leaf also shows slightly larger keyholes, but that same amphore-shaped sinus on the leaf. So you can kind of get an idea and notice the more robust shoulder on the right cluster Cabernet Franc. The first wine, boom. So that was our quick little presentation on. One thing I will say before we go on Cardinal Richelieu, two facts. One is he invented the table knife, because in the 17th century, he was disgusted by the fact that French people would pick their teeth at table with a steak knife. So he blunted it so people couldn't pick their teeth with it. Just a little thing I learned this morning that I thought I would share. Thank you, Cardinal Richelieu, for Cabernet Franc and the table knife. So we're talking first about the Lohr, where in 1642, Cardinal Richelieu rolled in with Cabernet Franc cuttings and gave them to the Abbey of Bourgueil. And so Bourgueil was kind of the beginning of Lohr Cab Franc and us enjoying this Cab Franc. It's recently become the de facto center for France's pursuit of organic, balanced, and biodynamic principles. I like to say, you know, the Lohr is underpriced, underappreciated, and so diverse, it's sometimes difficult to understand. But that's one reason why we're here today to talk about it. Only red wine is authorized in this actual village in Saumur. We could also be talking about Chinon. We could be talking about Anjou. We could be talking about Bourgueil. So today, though, we're talking about Saumur. Smaller additions of Cabernet Sauvignon and Pinot de Nuit are permitted. The soils of this region are what they call the tuffeau, which is sort of a fossilized white stone, porous like all the great stones of the world that produce wonderful wine. It's going to absorb water when it's wet, give off water when it's dry, and also provide excellent drainage and the calcium content necessary for thicker skins on the grapes. Grapevines determine the thickness of their skins by virtue of how much exchangeable calcium is at their root level. So these type of fossilized soils, just like limestone, just like calcareous shale, diatomaceous earth in the Santa Rita Hills, are going to have a profound impact on the skin thickness to reduce the amount of juice in each berry, to actually also increase skin to juice ratio, which is going to produce wines of great depth and flavor. The expression decidedly elegant, with expression of flowers and chalky minerals, as well as those beautiful red and black berry fruits. Lohr Cab Francs, they tend to show a little bit more restraint. I like them actually a little bit chilled in the summer. If it's hot outside, I have no problem putting a little chill on a nice Lohr Cab Franc and having it with a sandwich or some fried chicken, or some duck confit, anything like that. I find when I want Cabernet Franc to go with a more Pinot-friendly dish, I'll go to the Lohr. The wine in your glass was $20 on the shelf. By the glass, $11. $13.5 on the alcohol. We don't know if that's true. The label looks like it's used, that same alcohol label looks like it's used time in and time out. Let's just say it is a lovely table wine, and maybe 13.5 is the new 12.5 in the Lohr. This is actually a designation of Les Épinards from the Vignerons de Saumur Rouge in Saumur, Loire. And you can see on your map exactly where that is. You can see a little bit about the wine. The varietal composition is 100% Cab Franc. The average age of the vines are 40 years, so they're kind of at the end of generally their the French people say you replant your parents' vineyard. It's basically replanted once per generation, so about 40 years. Those vines are pretty old. At that point, you would choose to replant the vineyard, or maybe start replanting 5% of the vineyard per year to make sure you're starting to get on a 20-year cycle of making sure the vineyard is always producing. You can read a little bit about the winemaking, but what I'd like to do is just take a moment to taste and open up the the conversation if anyone has anything to share or their perceptions on this wine or the Lohr. By far, the least expensive wine to taste by 50%. I thought this was a good initiation into the deep wisdom of all things Cabernet Franc, because I believe the first wine is going to be the lightest and the last Napa wine is going to be the most intense.
Does it have anything to do with topsoil?
Well, you can't really transport minerals from the ground into a wine. It doesn't work that way.
No, just the mouth, the dusty top.
Yes, the minerality of the wine, probably, to me, minerality requires two precursors. Minerality requires low pH and high calcium in soil. The question I always ask, have you ever had a mineral wine that's flat? The answer is no, it's impossible. Low pH is the buffer that allows us to participate in the mineral content and that flavor of the wine. So Chablis, I would say Chablis to me is one of the most mineral wines in the world. Super low pH, high TA, and basically you're growing on a whole sort of seabed with a lot of minerality. So you gotta have high calcium, you gotta have low pH. So I would say that kind of mineral grit to me is that high calcium soil, thickening the skins, minimizing the juice and berries, and getting us a little more phenolics. They're giving us that wonderful grit. It's an interesting one because it's elevated, but it also has some good structure. You know, these are some of my favorite type of food wines. Anyone want to throw out what maybe they would like to match this wine? I used to be a high school teacher, don't make me call on me. I retired from a really good career in public education. Kids drove me to drink, I went club. Yeah, I mean, I like to think chanterelle mushrooms, chanterelle mushroom soup. I like to think of trout. If it grows together, it goes together. So I would like to see what critters are running around the vineyard, shoot them, put them in the stew and eat them. I think the sympathy of the place and the animals that live on the place. I also am looking for the critters that are running around.
Sympathy is not our word. I understand what you're saying.
I do have canine, so yeah, it's flavor sympathy for something that grows. Any other comments on the wine?
Would they be entirely stocked in that part of the world?
I think absolutely. In fact, the Lohr was one region where Lohr was absolutely devastating area. And one of the entomologists who studied Lohr and started working with it, I think some of the first places that they actually determined, I think it was actually the Lohr guy who was reading Origin of Species and figured out Darwin was right. Then they could just bring rootstock over from where Lohr first originated, because a rootstock in the United States would have 200 million years of evolutionary benefit of living with a phylloxera. Turns out he's right. Texas rootstock, Missouri rootstock, Minnesota rootstock. You sting the root, it bifurcates. French rootstock, you sting the root, it dies. So that's why the rootstock was so important.
You know, with that, as frequently as they're getting into placing vines out there, is everything still cordon pruned, or have they been dabbling?
I see cordon pruning almost everywhere I go in France. My expertise is actually Berkeley, and one thing I did notice is only one Grand Cru vineyard that I saw in Lohr that was cane pruned, and that was Romain Saint-Amand, and I have no idea why. But yeah, I think these vines are probably production. They're gonna probably try to, for this price point, I think I put $45 per acre. I don't know if that's the correct area on that, but my guess is this is probably spur pruned with a couple acres, if I had. All right, moving right along. Okay, next wine. Okay. We will talk a little bit about it and whet your palate for a delicious wine from Bordeaux. So I want to teach you a really cool trick to remember left bank and right bank. So we have the Gironde estuary here, we have the Dordogne, and we have the Garonne. We have the city of Bordeaux, Saint-Emilion, where we're talking. So Saint-Emilion is going to be right bank. So this is really cool to remember. So remember, right bank comes in the alphabet after left bank. Merlot comes in the alphabet after Cabernet Sauvignon. So left bank, Cabernet Sauvignon base, right bank, Merlot base. Merlot is closer in the alphabet to right, and left is closer to Cabernet. They both come first in the alphabet. That's the way that I remember. And the area in between, entre guillemets. We are looking at Saint-Emilion. Saint-Emilion was not included in the 1855 classification. It had its own classification in 1955. So those 55 numbers are obviously very important. As you taste this wine and think about it, I'm going to be looking for more comments. I'm going to get tired of my own voice. So this one's really easy, 50% Merlot, 50% Cab Franc. Split right down the middle. Definitely tried to find the highest percentage. I do, thank you. Highest percentage of Cab Franc that I could find. This wine on wine.com. Shoot, I shouldn't have said that. I should have asked for a discount. 40 bucks. 40 bucks. So pretty moderate in the world of the Bordeaux. So by far, Saint-Emilion has a history that goes way, way, way back. One reason that there's so many different kind of blends and so many different styles in Bordeaux is that the areas that were owned in this area in the pre-Napoleon, post-Napoleonic era were so small that the chateaus all had their own ideas and thoughts about how to make wine and how to blend. Bordeaux estates, and as a result has many, many, many different class Bordeaux. It's three distinct terroirs: the limestone plateau, the slopes closest to the plateau, and the flats. And most of the better Saint-Emilion wine comes from the chateau located on the côtes. Côtes is limestone-rich hillsides that surround the picturesque village of Saint-Emilion. Wine from the sandy soils is often lighter, a little more red fruit character, while the wines from clay and limestone soils are often richer, deeper, and long-lasting. Certainly, Saint-Emilion is known for a little more gravelly and sandy soil than a lot of other places within the right bank. And as a result, the wines do have a capacity for a little more aging. A number of right bank wines are fairly good to drink right away. The Merlot gives them a nice plush softness that allows them. But of course, Cab Franc gives them the character, the Cardinal Richelieu sort of character to give the wine structure, acidity, and some wonderful spiciness. And here's the production notes. Again, about the same vine age as the Lohr vines that we saw, about 35 years old. This is a modern winery that uses temperature-controlled tanks for fermentation. James Suckling said that pretty depth of fruit and composure to this wine, old vine cuvee with 45 years of age. Although the website said 35, so they lied to Suckling. That's okay, we still love them. I would say for Tanamyces, it's like cheating at poker. Once you notice, you don't too damn far. Would you say this is done? For a geek, yes. For Tanamyces, it's fantastic in a way because it actually consumes all the unfermented sugar in the wine. So for a culture that drinks 85% of the wines we buy within 48 hours of purchase, the Tanamyces gives the wine a little bit more complexity and earthiness. Now, if this wine is improperly cellared, it can stink like breath, really bad if it's bloomed in the bottle. at where it is right now, I'm a bit of a Brazil, but I actually give it a little bit extra love because it's Bordeaux. So if this was a domestic wine, I'd kind of look at the winemaker and say, you know, probably clean the cellar a little bit, but I think there's a certain charm to Brettanomyces in Bordeaux. It's like they meant to do. They probably would say, of course, of course.
The way it comes off is very on the reductive side, like soy saucy, which with excessive stirring and swirling certainly cleans up a little bit. Far from like the barnyard, the fireworks sort of looking stuff. So
I like how it brings out the sort of some elegance in the wine. I think because it's losing its baby fat a little early because it's being eaten by the Brettanomyces. What's coming out of the baby fat is a more mature idea of this wine that should occur at this point from 2018. I strongly believe that this is very unfair to all these wines in the sense I have a very strong belief that for a wine to become, it requires three things. It requires at least an hour, at least one person you love at table, and delicious things. Take away love, time, and food, wine fails. That's what beer is. I drink Tuesday, what's still here? I had an experience with this beer like that. Right. I drink beer standing out, wine table with food, spirits with food table on the floor. Depending on the day. Thank you, that was great. Comments, Bordeaux, this wine. What does the Merlot do? What's the Cab Franc do? What do we think? Yeah. I almost expect a little more depth, a little more richness and concentration from the color. And I think we're going to kind of a master class on how Brettanomyces affects your wine. Brettanomyces, if you don't know, is a spoilage bacteria. We try to keep out of wine, but it's kind of been thought of and described by French winemakers as part of their law. Completely total BS. It is a spoilage bacteria that really doesn't need to be in wine, and to be honest, with modern technology, ozone machines, etc., it doesn't have to be in wine, but it does kind of come across as charm. That's what the Castell. They burned down their winery and built a new one because it was filled with secret bread. And now you take Coca Castell, it doesn't taste like Coca Castell. It almost tastes very different wine than that. So, it's part of their law, certainly argue that it is.
When you argue that it's an acceptable flaw,
It is an acceptable
except
flaw.
for those that hate it.
It's a stylistic, it's the same thing as is there too much oak? You know, is there too much bread? It's all important. I say love to drink what you love. I find Brettanomyces fascinating because I don't have the patience as an American that sell these wines for 10 years. So I'm tasting a wine that's a little bit of a time machine because the Brettanomyces is taking me forward to a place where this wine would be in that bread in 5 to 10 years. But it does have a little of the aromatic, I think. But I'd love to get the focus back on Bordeaux and Cabernet Franc. Now that we know, now we kind of match it. Let's find out. So I don't get a lot of wood for a young wine. My guess would be no more than 20% new. I also like to ask another question before talking about oak is the wine fundamentally balanced with the amount of oak that it has? And one thing we try to do in this tasting is not treat wine with affectation, but wines that truly represent the place and the time they were from. So not a lot of this stuff, except maybe when we get to Napa at the end. So surprise, gonna be a bigger one. I like the fact that this one is moderately under oak. So we're looking through the production, through the winemaker's application, to really the flavors that come out of Bordeaux. And I do think that this is the only one that are going to make some tasting that does show a little Brettanomyces together. But I would think there's more than 20% new in this. If that's for $40 wine, that seems about appropriate.
I think the tannins show through in a very pretty way, especially for the price point as well.
Yeah, I think again, the drive at this point in his life, it doesn't. There's that little loss of baby fat from the Brettanomyces. Anyone think about what they'd like to eat with this?
Oh, yeah.
What is it?
I'm gonna do a corn-seed rabbit. Oh, duck fat. Put it in empanada and season it with like some cumin and black mustard seeds.
Oh, you had me at rabbit. By the way, I breed Californians, so if you want a really well taken care of rabbit, like 12 pounds dressed out,
Yeah,
I would bring the rabbit.
we're gonna give each other some time.
I love the fact that rabbit was actually approved. It used to be before 2016. You could not have rabbit on your menu like your religious star, nor should you have goat. Until LBB said, okay, screw you, I'm putting rabbit and goat on my menu. Make my star. Do it. And now they did 3 rules in 16. You can have a rabbit, goat on your menu. You can also have mixed match plates on the table. By the way, congratulations to the Bloods.
Yes. Since we are really live,
Yes.
would you use the mic?
Sure.
Because the only way for the audience. We will work the next one.
Yep. Onward. Okay, let's go ahead and pour the next one. And any other comments about Bordeaux while these wines are poured? We'd love to hear it. Yes. Oh yeah, yeah, something like a Niepoisse. Yeah, the question was a nice washed rind cheese with the Bordeaux. I think would be lovely. Yeah. Something with a lot of fat to cut those dusty tannins, an Affiné or a nice Latour. Yes, we are going to make you hungry. I'd rather talk about what I want to eat with the wine than trying to describe it with fruits and nuts. As that wine is being poured, I'll also tell you, Dr. Craig Root, I know there's a lot of professionals here. Cool thing about tasting notes. Dr. Craig Root discovered after doing a test that if your tasting notes include more than 3 fruits or references of spices, you start losing sales in your tasting room. He found that stylistic and structural tasting notes with wine pairing are the best way to sell wines when you are putting tasting notes in front of your customers. If you say blackberry, blueberry, strawberry, and you make basically a litany of references in your notes, you make your customers believe either they're broken or you're broken because they don't smell what you smell. So keep your tasting notes extraordinarily structural, wide, and focused on what the wine is going to be used for at table with matching, and you'll sell a lot more wine. Every reference after 3, sales went down on average 1% on that SKU. Let's talk a little bit about Hungary. So you probably thought I was going to come in with a Veleni. The Veleni region is down that little pink area in Hungary. That is the sunniest part of Hungary. That is the place to grow the ripest, darkest fruit. The wines from Hungary in that Veleni region tend to be the most famous in Hungary. We decided to go a little more cool climate, and we found this wine from Eger, which is up in up closer to the northern border. I believe is right there where the pink, kind of the little pink drop looks like just above where it says Wine Country Hungary. This wine is 13.5% ABV, quote unquote. $20. No, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the Ipana. I'm sorry. You're right. My bad. $14.5 and $40. $14.5, $40. For me, the roasted red pepper, and after I said don't use references, I guess I'm not selling it. But that the strawberry and roasted red pepper seemed a little bit more evident to me. And honestly, this is the first wine we've had that I can really talk about fruit in the nose. No, if anything, I'd say it could be 5 to 10 cents. I think to me, it shows a little bit floral character that I associate with stem inclusion, but beautifully balanced with that strawberry fruit and everything. If there is bread in this wine, it's been successfully cheap. You could raise the pot, and I would go ahead and throw them in. We are live streaming, so I'm supposed to use the microphone. I get excited.
When you say this is the first one we've had that's completely varietally correct, that you could easily identify as Cab Franc and a blind tasting.
The question was whether this is the first wine we've had that really speaks of sort of Cab Franc typicity. I think the first two wines, the first one I'd be lucky to nail blind as Lohr. I certainly wouldn't know enough to differentiate the regions of Lohr, but it did have, I think, some typicity. But this wine, I think, has a little bit of fat to it. And as a New World drinker, I think yes. I think there is some Cab Franc typicity to this wine that has been lacking in the last wine because of Brettanomyces, and the earlier wine probably because of a very large amount of crop, would be my guess, for that kind of by the glass price point. Yeah, it definitely has a little more roundness in the mouth, and I think that the fruit and the extract do a better job of balancing the structure. Food matches, questions, comments on this beautiful wine? Yes. I'm ready. Yep. Ooh. Yes, so we're talking about sort of a citrus glazed lamb. Oh, orange zest with a little bit of chili. I love it too because I think that kind of roasted pepper. You know, some of the wines had a little more kind of the green pyrazine. This strikes me as more ripe, kind of red. Yeah, great. I love hearing people talk about food. Not only do I get hungry, but I start thinking about what I'm going to do with this wine, if we have any left, which not too much. Something with sweet paprika. And isn't paprika a big Hungary thing? Yeah. No, I love that idea too. I believe it is. Yes. And again, these my notes in this presentation is available to anyone just by asking. So we're looking at 30-year-old vines. So we really haven't had anything less than sort of fully mature vines in the lineup thus far. They're against filtering the wine to keep fine flavors at their fullest, probably meaning to not strip the manoproteins or some of the more delicate aromas out of the wine with modern filtration. Cabernet Franc's herbaceous leafy notes on the cusp of full ripeness. Several harvests to get only the perfect grapes. Winemakers in the room realize there's no such thing as a perfect grape, but it's nice to put in the notes. Juicy fruitiness, spiciness in abundance, eucalyptus, tobacco, autumn leaves, cassis, truffles, as well as the dominant fruits. They used 4. They just lost 1% of their sales. The lively and long acidity brings tension. It is parenthetical, so yeah. Long and refined on the palate, medium plus finish rather than full bodied. Remember, we're talking about Agere. If we were talking about Villani, we would have a bigger wine. We're probably, if the equivalent between, this is probably Winkler Zone 2 as opposed to Winkler Zone 3 down in Villani. So we're moving from an area where you could grow Chardonnay, even on the edge of probably one of the perfect places for some Rhone varieties, which generally is going to show in Cabernet Franc a little bit more acidity and a little more pyrazine character. Ideal for red meat and game, just about anything grilled. I like to match the intensity of the dish to the intensity of the wine. So I would say this is sort of medium plus, so it can definitely handle some fat. I like to match the structure of the wine to the level of fat in the food. Fat needing to be stripped off our tongue by acidity, alcohol, and tannin to reset our palate so we can taste again. Comments on Agere, Hungary. This is my first Agere, so it's the best and the worst Agere I've ever had. I'm not, the question was the soils and the moisture holding capacity. I'm not all that familiar with the soils in this region. I do know that obviously soils that are kind of going to be, have a lot of biological material from basically all the breaking down of all the forest materials would probably have, you know, a decent amount of tilt to them, a lot of biological activity. And of course, the higher the clay content, the more the water holding capacity, as well as the cation exchange capacity for exchanging nutrients. So if we knew how much clay was in the soil, it would probably be a little bit easier to understand. But if you're interested, I would do the research and get back to you on that.
So Nita and I were in Hungary about a year or so ago, and we went to this wine shop called Taste of Hungary. They have a US presence, and that's where I purchased this wine from. The sommelier at that shop just got Best Sommelier in Europe award about 2 months ago.
The Taste of Hungary website, .us, tasteofhungary.us. I find this to be a charming little wine. And I think we got set up, right? We got set up with a nice light Saumur. We got kind of a bready Bordeaux. And then the first thing that shows a little bit of California, you know, a little bit of sunshine, right? I think Galileo said wine is sunlight held together by water. And this starts showing a little bit more of the sunny side of Cab Franc. And definitely, I agree, a little more varietal typicity. Questions about Ager, Hungary, comments about the wine? Yes. I cannot imagine. I gotta think it's 100%. Why would Hungary buy French oak? And by the way, you do know before the Iron Curtain fell, most French winemakers were using Hungarian oak. The only reason why French oak became in de rigueur in France is they lost access to Hungarian oak after the fall of the Iron Curtain. So if you look back in like sort of like pre-Jair, pre-World War II, World War II and the availability, the idea is that the oak coming from Eastern Europe and specifically Hungary was superior to French oak. So this idea now of all the different French oaks, the Limousin and the Vosges and the Trancet and the Allier, all these fancy oaks would not have been recognized the same way in pre-World War II. So French oak is sort of a new thing, and I love bringing it up to Burgundian winemakers because at first they think it's total BS, and then they ask their grandfather, and they're like, he's right. He even knows Cardinal Richelieu. Yes. That's an approximation. Wow. Cool. Yeah. Absolutely. Cool. Yeah. So region 2 is going to be very similar as we mentioned to the cooler regions of Central Paso, such as Willow Creek. Price point on the $40. I think it's a nice drinker for $40. Speaking of which, I need an empty glass. In 424 BCE, one of my favorite playwrights, Aristophanes, said, "Quickly bring me a flagon of wine so I may wet my brain and say something clever." I start every winemaker dinner like that because that's what we all believe. We'll have a few drinks and we'll be more clever. Sometimes it works. Or not. Yes. Tip your waitress, try the veal. Yeah, the more you drink, the better I sound. That was actually a quote from Blues Traveler in 1989. So we're drinking the 2017 Garage Wine Company. I have no idea why a place down in the Maipo Valley of Chile would use that description. Let's see, I want to make sure. Yes. So we're talking totally native fermentation. I like to say feral fermentation. We don't know what's really loose in the winery, but they're calling it open top fermenters. That is definitely a feral fermentation. Caps were punched down by hand because, pump overs are for wussies. Yeah, real wine is made by punching down. I'll just say it. I believe it strongly. Native ferment, I had to look up what the hell P de Cuba is. It's using an active fermenting wine to ferment must. So P de Cuba just basically means it's an old sherry technique to keep the yeast going. It's very Presbyterian, in other words, cheap. No temperature control on fermentation. I love just a pinch of sulfites. I'm just saying, I hope they actually measured. But they said they pinch of sulfites after malolactic before the winter begins. And their tasting notes, a little closed but solid, varietal and zone character without excessive mintiness. I guess that might be an issue in Chile. If they say without excessive mintiness, trust me, that means it's an issue down there. Faintly balsamic, yum. It's still very young, but seems to have all the ingredients for great development in bottle. Parker, what did Parker say? I don't really care. Although I will say there's two Roberts that changed American wine, Robert Mondavi and Robert Parker. One got us to sit at table and drink fine wine, and the other one reminded us, basically, and pushed forward wine culture. I think they're both American heroes, even though I talk a lot of smack about Parker. No, that was probably, Derek Mossman. Elegant blue-fruited jet with muscles inside a well-cut jacket. Yeah, anthropomorphize the wine a little bit more, buddy. Hey, that's very French, right? I remember Aubert de Villaine one time told me as we were drinking a 1995 Echezot, this is like a young man concealing his character for the future. Okay. I took all the notes on all the DRC wines. I was sitting next to Aubert at the tasting. The last note I made fastidious notes on all the wines, and I got to the Romani Conti, and I smelled it. I'm like, oh my God. And my notes were F-U ... Aubert looked at me, taking the notes. He said, Monsieur, that's the first honest note you've made all day. I like that. So yes, it's going to be, and all of a sudden my glass is full. I love this. I do love how the wines are building in a little bit of mid-palate, richness and intensity. Although this wine does really have some good tannic structure as well. Comments, questions about the wine? Oh, yes. Silly me. Let's talk about the Mayopo. Often described as the Bordeaux of South America. Let me guess, they probably came up with that. Cabernet Franc could be described as halfway between a ripe Sauvignon and a crisp Chinon, but has very much its own identity. So we're looking at the upper, runs along the eastern edge of the Andes. Warm sun, obviously big diurnal shift, creates grapes with balance of ripeness and acidity. The central low-lying area to the west, warmest and driest, clay-based fertile soils right along the soils of the Maipo. So it's going to be a little more alluvial, probably a little more gravelly and sandy. And the lower Maipo has more of a coastal influence of the Pacific Ocean that creates wines with a little bit refreshing acidity and a longer hang time, I would assume, too. We were talking about varietal typicity. My feeling is this is the most varietally typical wine that we've smelled so far. This is definitely a wine that I would have a good chance nailing blind as a Cab Franc. The last wine had some really, really nice aromatic character as well. I just think this wine is, I used to judge with some German people, and German people are pretty weird when they taste wine, but they like to use the word round, and it doesn't mean what you think they do. A wine is either rund or nicht rund. The wine tells an entire story or it doesn't. A round wine is a complete wine, and a not round wine means it either needs time or it's not quite ready. I find this wine very round in the sense it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and the narrative is complete. Every wine has had its own roundness today, and again, judging them in 10 minutes and then putting them away is a little disingenuous, but that's how we evaluate and talk about wine in general at these seminars. I'd love your opinion on this wine. tiny little bit of like a roasted red pepper. A fully, pyrazines are a weird thing. All grapes start with methoxypyrazine within the grape. And the way we get rid of pyrazines is sun exposure on the cluster. As sun exposure on the cluster happens, the pyrazines basically change their molecular bonds and become terpenes. So you can turn methoxypyrazine into monoterpene by proper canopy management. But you don't want to completely destroy all the pyrazine compounds. My belief is there are pyrazine echoes. Black pepper, white pepper in Rhone varieties are pyrazines, but they're pyrazines that have been managed in the vineyard not to be green. So it depends on how you really want those pyrazines to show. This is how I like my pyrazines in wine. I'm a Pinot guy, and in Pinot Noir, we try to eliminate all pyrazines for a more juicy, bright, sort of saturated character, especially down in the Santa Rita Hills where I first learned to make Pinot Noir. I think this would be beautiful with some, like, I'm a Santa Maria guy, but my brain goes to, red oak grilled tri-tip, Paquito beans, garlic bread on a nice Sunday in a parking lot somewhere. That's how we roll in Santa Maria. We're not fancy folk. And the mint is certainly another expression of the pyrazine. And certainly the Cabernet family has more pyrazines. I mean, that's what Sauvignon means, right? We're not drinking Cabernet Sauvignon, but Sauvignon means savage. It means animal. It means it better leap out of the glass, to me. That the Cabernet family, when it doesn't have aromatic intensity, to me, is a slight failure. This is not a failure. I think this wine is really beautiful. And I don't drink a lot of South American wine, so it's always wonderful to experience that. I believe, I want to make sure I give you an accurate, is 40, no, excuse me, $50. And you can tell it's small production because it's the Garage Wine Company. All right, we talked about Cardinal Richelieu. Got to talk about Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson's attempt to bring Bordeaux varieties to Monticello, Virginia, was an abject failure. If you read Jefferson's notes on his attempts at viticulture at Monticello, it reads like a sad, sad story of that guy you knew who tried to come out of some, being a lawyer in LA and come up here and try to grow some grapes, but he wasn't going to get any help. He wasn't going to get a consultant. And mildew ravaged him and he got disease. And man, Jefferson did not have a good go of growing Bordeaux varieties or any varieties successfully at Monticello. This wine was grown within 10 miles of Jefferson's Monticello. And I would like to say, very often we say he'd be spinning in his grave. He would be smiling in his grave, extraordinarily excited that his home of Monticello is now producing quality Cab Franc wine. I want to first thank the Stinson family for sending me this wine for free. Thank you guys. If you're ever in Virginia, they provided these wines for the seminar. They even paid for shipping, and we know how cheap that is. Okay. Yeah, the pour is going to be a little bit smaller on this. We did have one cork bottle that our crack team of sommeliers discovered. Well done. So yeah, so from the abject failure to grow drinkable wine in the Revolutionary period. By the way, did you know how much people drank in the Revolutionary period? Look it up. I'm not going to tell you, but holy moly. They didn't even consider beer and wine alcohol. You know what kids ate for breakfast? Beer. That's called a small beer because it was basically what you gave your kids before they went to school. So Virginia is a success story of East Coast viticulture. If you haven't had the Viognier, specifically, I think the best wine they grow in Virginia, although I'd probably, these are fighting words for the Virginia winemakers, is Norton. I think Norton in central Missouri, Norton also on the eastern seaboard, often produces superior wines to vinifera. I am a vinifera snob, but I also know if the wine is better by using a French-American hybrid, let's go for it. There are over 300 wineries now spread across the region. Jefferson had 24 varieties on his property. Unfortunately, he never produced a single bottle. 24 varietals. That's a heartbreak. So you have the Tidewater Piedmont, not the one with truffles, but actually they do grow truffles there, and they taste like a decent mushroom. Northern Virginia, Western Mountain, and Southwestern Mountain AVAs. Iron-rich clay, sand, loam, and granite. You don't see a lot of iron-rich clay. Iron-rich clay is obviously visible because of its red color as it oxidizes. And the weather, yes, it's subtropical humid. Serious issues for growing quality grapes within this region. And then creating great sites for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Sure, buddies. Sure. I will just go ahead and say that I have never had a palatable Chardonnay or Pinot Noir. That's not true. I had a palatable Chardonnay from Virginia, but if they're making Pinot of quality, it has escaped my palate thus far. Blue Ridge Mountains. Allison Levine. Here today writing for the Napa Valley Register. Yes, Napa Valley is interested in what Paso is doing with Cab Franc. What up? She's LA based, but yeah. Beautiful. I love it. Yeah, no, they should be. Absolutely. We're doing absolutely wonderful stuff here. So that'll give you a little bit of information. The notes from Stinson were fairly limited, but you can see what they did offer. 220 to 250 days bud break to harvest. That subtropical maritime 39 to 40 inches of rain must be nice. By the way, the homeland of vinifera between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, where Vitis vinifera developed, about 35 inches of annual rainfall. So that's why we normally consider about 20 to 25 inches minimal rainfall annually for dry farming. Grapevines really do prefer about 30 to 35 inches of rainfall annually in their native habitat. Stinson family, full-bodied Cabernet with spicy tannins, dried floral aromatics, and white peppercorn. Whole berry fermented and aged in French oak. So I guess it was destemmed, but not crushed. Stems were taken out, berries were put in the fermenter whole. And we do thank the Stinsons for sending us this wine to evaluate East Coast viticulture. We don't drink a lot of East Coast wine out here on the West Coast. What do you guys think? So yeah, we did have one comment that it was impressive for an effort from East Coast viticulture. Yes, comment was that Virginia does consider Cab Franc their state wine. I was there with a conference of Winemaker Magazine about 7 years ago and did taste about 20 different producers. And I did walk away with a great sort of, there's a lot of passion there. There's a lot of people that are really doing wonderful work. Also a lot of like DC money getting out of the Beltway is moving into Virginia. So we're seeing increased sort of involvement and economics within the region. Obviously, you know, throwing money at a winery sometimes is a good idea. At least you can afford new oak. I think this wine is a fantastic bookend from Saumur. This wine reminds me of a Saumur with more oak. I get a little more vanilla and a little bit of like a little bit of sort of a baking spice character that I think is oak driven. But the wine, again, I think this is a beautiful wine for dinner. I think this wine could run a number of issues. I think you could chill this down a little bit and have it as a sort of a picnic wine in the summer, and certainly would match with a lot of cuisine. I think this is an amazingly food-friendly wine, and I think the pyrazine level is absolutely really quite nice to stunning for an East Coast wine. East Coast Cab Franc can easily get pretty green. I don't find this wine specifically green. I find it actually more elegant and quite lovely. Any other comments about some Virginia Cab Franc? Price point is, I'm going to make sure I give you an accurate assessment. I did not actually, because it was free. I looked it up. I think it's about $40. So I think the Crocker and Star Napa was purchased from the winery.
So a lot of these wines were purchased on wine.com, other places. The Star was purchased from a wine shop called La Costa that Jeff introduced us to. The Hungarian wine was Taste of Hungary. This was obviously given to us probably on their website. What I'll do is, as a follow-up to this seminar, I will send all of the presentation as well as a link to purchase all the different wines that we've tasted. And I wanted to make one more comment. We picked 6 different wines and regions for this presentation. Next year, when we do this, we'll pick 6 different ones because it's just way more Cab Franc producing regions than we could cover in one seminar without boring all of you.
Okay, you've done. Yeah. Fabulous. Thank you so much, Kunal. All right, let's finish strong. So we will be pouring the last wine. First known Cabernet Franc in the region was planted in 1950 de Terre, which was originally part of Tocolone. Dieter Vineyard. Thank you. So yes, the Dieter Vineyard, 1949, Cab Franc in the region. Appreciate letting me know how to pronounce that correctly. 1,211 acres of Cabernet Franc exist in Napa, compared to 24,000 acres of Cabernet Sauvignon. But look at this. Not only, I mean, obviously, the best Cab Franc in Napa is probably in some of the same regions where you're seeing some of the highest quality Cab Sauv, Howell Mountain, Mount Veeder, Diamond Mountain, Spring Mountain, wines that are generally in excess of $150 a bottle. Those mountain plantings obviously make amazing wine. In 2019, you're looking at about 8,000 a ton for Cabernet and about 10,000 a ton for Cab Franc. So the desire and basically supply and demand have a huge effect on Cab Franc pricing. And if you know the Australian model, take the ton price. 1% of the ton price should be the approximate bottle cost of the wine. If you spend $10,000 a ton for your fruit, that should make a $100 bottle of wine. If you spend $5,000 for a ton of fruit, it should make a $50 bottle of wine. Moderately rocky, gravelly soil with medium to high drainage. One reason why the hillsides do so well, especially areas with alluvial fans moving west from the Mayacamas range. The alluvial fans are obviously the areas where the geologic material breaks down into a slightly higher vigor situation, which tends to make wines and produce a pretty decent crop of fruit. Such soils are so granular, such sort of large soil particles, that gravity pulls water away from the vines, forcing the roots to chase after it. And the result of a little bit of deficit irrigation is that smaller berries, and as the berry size shrinks, the amount of juice within the berry also shrinks exponentially. So just a 10% decrease in the berry size has a very profound impact on the flavor and intensity of the wine. And I think we'll see that here. One thing I'm expecting out of the Napa wine, maybe I already tasted it, is it's going to be a little punch in the face compared to what we've tasted before. And yeah, Dieter is the correct pronunciation. So we have a wonderful expert here up on Napa. He said that the Cab Franc from Dieter was the first Cab Franc that Robert Mondavi put into his blend. So that's a huge thing, into the high-end blends. Yep. And obviously, you know, a great man, Robert Mondavi. Supposedly he liked a couple bottles for lunch and a couple bottles for dinner, and what, he lived to be 95. So let's all hope we have the liver capacity and the dehydrogenized enzymes that man had. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. All right. And our last wine slide, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Paso Robles Cabernet Franc with our August panel. So we've got a little information here about the Crocker and Star, 2016. Oh, by the way, this is not 100% Cab Franc. It was mislabeled. I checked the label on the way in. 68% Cab Franc, 23% Cab Sauv, 7% Petit Verdot, 2% Malbec. And remember, Malbec really doesn't figure into Bordeaux much anymore after 1956. After a horrific frost, Malbec buds really early, and they moved most of the Malbec production and allowed it really to move back into the Cahors to make that famous black wine of Cahors. This one, according to the back label, am I right on the back label? It's a blend, yes? Cool. Yeah, that blend I took right off the bottle, so it should be accurate. But yes, there might be 100% Cab Franc as well. This one is a Cab Franc forward blend. Yes.
That bottle shot is incorrect. So we're looking at a different bottle shot by mistake. So that's a typo which we'll fix.
Just like Cardinal Richelieu, it's all about the entire country of France and the entire blend within the Cab Franc world. So 4 years of drought obviously is gonna, oh, that's not the right one. Oh, okay, gotcha, no worries. And then, so this is the right text, wrong bottle. Not a problem. Steady, mild July and August weather, warm days at the end of the growing season. They called it perfect ripeness. I disagree, I don't think there's such a thing. Harvest ended early October, yields were low, grapes were beautiful to make that stellar estate wine. You can see that there was a post-harvest rainstorm. Obviously, that's incredibly good for the grapevines. Just like that beautiful rain we had last night, pennies from heaven, getting the salts out of our soil profile. 16 is the first vintage housed in their new estate winery. So we can expect a very clean wine because there's not a lot of rogue microbes floating around. The longer you work in a winery, the less control you have of the microbial population within it. The low yield, and they said that at least twice. So there must be some influence from that low yield. Let's talk about this beautiful Napa wine. Who would like to make a comment about it? You guys have all had enough to drink to say something out loud or dance. With this type of intensity, I think we also would have to up the intensity of what we ate with it. I'd like to offer a beef short rib with some mashed potatoes. Butter, yes. As Julia Child said, there's 3 secrets to French cooking: butter, butter, and butter. It does. That wine is modern, clean, and oak laden. When is the use of new French oak too much? I've got to go to Mel Knox. Mel Knox sells Francois Ferrer barrels, so he knows a little something about a lot of oak. He said to me when I was a young winemaker at 29, something that I thought was complete and total BS until I was about 40. And that was, you can't over oak a wine, but you can under wine the oak. Let's talk about Montrachet. Fermented in brand new, 100% new demi barrels, racked after primary fermentation into brand new demi French oak barrels. 200% new French oak. I challenge anyone to tell me that Montrachet is over oaked. You can't over oak a wine, but you can under wine the oak. I think the oak treatment in this wine takes a little away from its varietal correctness. That's weird about oak, is because it integrates into the wine. So, I mean, you put a lot of money into those barrels, $1,000, $1,200 a barrel, and then you kind of let the wine, sit in that barrel so people say, wow. And it's nice when you have enough oak that your customers say, I smell oak. Because that's kind of a magic moment for your customers. to give them something that they can hang their hat on. Here's my question. Does the richness and the extraction of this wine help its varietal characteristics that we would associate with Cabernet Franc, or does it take it away from it? Do you think, I'll ask this, who in the room finds this their favorite wine out of the 6? I'm close. I really, okay. How about, who preferred the Saumur, number 1, the Lohr? We'll have some duck later. I love it. I love it. How about the Bordeaux? Couple? And Lori, who started Cab Franc Day, that gives you huge. I'm going to give you 6 points on that. Let's see. We went to how about Chile? How about the Maipo? Okay, 4 or 5. How many people loved Virginia? Excellent. Brave people. Me too. I thought it was a beautiful wine. And then Hungary. Oh man, don't tell them. They're going to raise the damn prices. No, but I think there's something to be said that there's places in Europe that can grow extraordinarily beautiful wine. It might even be, someplace in that's a beautiful site. And then Napa, and then we said last was Napa. We had 4 or 5 people that preferred the Napa wine as well. Anyone like to make a last comment on Napa before we ask our panel up here to talk a little bit about Paso? Yes. Price on this was $80. Oh, I've seen your prices. Come on. Santa Barbara is starting to follow suit, so I'll just shut the hell up right now. I hope you guys all had a wonderful trip around the world in our glasses. I like to say wine is the only time machine that works. And I don't mean if you get drunk enough, you lose track of time. I mean, it takes us to a time and a place. Wine is the only thing in the world that you can put in your mouth that is quantum. It is time and place, and time cannot exist without place, and place cannot exist without time. So I'd like to thank every wine grower, every person that helped these wines to become, and for each and every one of you for your interest in Cab Franc. And for giving me a damn good reason to be drinking on a Sunday morning. Tasting, evaluating, yes.
Thank you, Wes. This is absolutely great, informative, and the way you present wines, the way you talk about wines is just very, very invigorating. So thank you for doing this. Now we have some panelists coming up. So let me introduce our panelists and the next. So by the way, we were supposed to wrap this up at 12 o'clock so we can all get to the grand tasting. The grand tasting is 3 hours long. So you're gonna have enough time to taste those wines out there as the next group comes and starts that tasting. So if we go a few minutes long, don't worry about it.
Can we have a round of applause for this fabulous presentation? I didn't even get a chance to taste all of them, and I felt like I went around the world with you. So thank you so much, Wes. And another round of applause to welcome our fabulous panelists, Michael Mooney, Chateau Margine, Stacy, who's the vineyard manager for Austin Hope, and Steve Peck, mentor, winemaker, stalwart, all those words, please.
Where's your glass, guys?
I love the fact, a lot of people like to say, wine is made in the vineyard, and then you put a bunch of winemakers up on a panel. So we've got growers here, and I think growers have a great insight. I was a vineyard manager for 24 years down in the Santa Rita Hills, and I know that kicking dirt, and I like to say that farming is probably the most scary thing we can do in our life. One of my favorite writers, David Mitchell, says, "Show me a placid farmer, I'll show you a sane conductor." So I thought that would be a good way to start. My first question for the panel, and Stacy, we'll start with you. is where do you think Cab Franc fits into this world tasting? Now that you've tasted the wines that we put together, where do you think Cab Franc fits in what we've tasted today in context?
I mean, I think we had such a good representation. Just a different, from a viticultural perspective, I always look at wines like that. I tend to kind of go back to the vineyard. When you talk about wines that are maybe more mass produced for pricing and that sort of thing, and then you go all the way through to the Napa Valley where we know things are produced a little differently and the intensity, I mean, I think for me, it's probably number 2 or 3 kind of in my scale of red wines. I mean, all of them are hanging pretty tough. And the fact that we were all able to pull some really beautiful pairings and some tastings out of it tells me that you're going to get a really great experience every time you're going to try a Cab Franc.
Well, I think we saw from the discussion that there's styles of Cabernet Franc, and from the Loire Valley and then to the Hungarian wine was shocking to me. I've never had the Hungarian Cabernet Franc, and then the Napa wine. So I think the Paso wine is certainly a warmer region. The Loire Valley, very cool, very low elevations. Paso Robles has a lot of diversity across the board from elevations at 600 foot to 2,200 foot. So you wind up with climatic differences. Paso's fruit is going to be more intense. It's going to be darker. It's going to be more akin to the Napa. But again, that wasn't my favorite wine this morning. But more akin to that, it's going to be darker. It's going to have more tannin. It's going to have more color. It's going to have a little more structure. We have a warmer climate. We're going to have a little higher alcohol. We have higher sugars. So that's the nature of the fruit. And I think it all fits where Paso fits in the world scheme of things, is that I enjoy a lot of different wines during the same meal. So as you go from course to course, I'm not looking for the same wine all the way through. I'm looking for maybe a Loire to start. And you being a Pinot guy, you lean towards maybe some of the lighter Cab Francs. But I'm looking for a meteor. Our cabs that you're going to taste today are big bad boys. Our style is to make a big extracted Cabernet Franc and Cabernet Sauvignon. So it's just, I think it's stylistic. None of them are wrong. They're just unique.
Well, first of all, thanks for hosting, Wes. You just did a great job. I learned a lot from your talk. You mentioned the 2 Roberts and Robert Mondavi really being the wine part of the food and wine revolution that kind of started in the 1970s. People like Alice Waters and really shifting, kind of the American cuisine from the hamburger helper of my parents' generation to kind of, I don't know, what we enjoy today, just to put it quickly. Then Robert Parker would, he takes a fair amount of criticism, but you also gave him a lot of love. But there definitely was a push in that Parker era in the 1990s towards, riper, longer hang time, higher alcohol, more extraction, and bigger was better. Bigger got you closer to that 100-point score. And so, there was a generation of winemakers. I think I'm part of that generation that was chasing, the bigger extracted, as you called, the big bad boy. But I think in white wine culture, there's I think that's that articulation is really where we are as an industry, to be able to kind of celebrate the uniqueness of Cabernet Franc and not have it compete with Sauvignon, Cabernet Sauvignon as kind of the biggest, baddest wine in town.
On the question of ripeness, I'm going to ask you guys to limit this to a number, and I'm going to really put you on the spot. At what level of bricks does Cabernet Franc lose its varietal character?
$28.
26.75.
28. It's a sweet variety. So if for those that don't, keep track of this stuff, if you're, you've got a team out there checking bricks of all your different fields and whatnot, that Cab Franc, it sugars up early. It's a quote unquote sweet variety. Grenache is kind of the same way. And then you wait, you wait for the pH, you wait for the extractability of the pigment from the skins and so on. But it's one of the, the first out of the gate to produce sugar, and then you got to decide what kind of wine you want to make.
No, I like to put people on the spot, and it's an unfair question because there's so many other things, vintage, pH, TA, varietal, and phenolic development. So I just put you guys on the spot. But obviously, it can go to a level where you're gonna, little post-harvest irrigation, little tartaric, happy. Question 2 for the panel, and we'll go the same way, is why is Paso Robles well suited for high quality Cabernet Franc production from the perspective of soil, terroir, and viticulture?
My favorite question. We have such versatility in our sub-districts and our microclimates. So depending on style, I think Cabernet Franc is one of the best suited for Paso in that range, right? You can go to the west side, you can go to higher elevations, a little bit cooler, and get a completely different wine than if you go, say, to the Paso Robles Highlands or the San Juan district, which, by the way, there's not that much grown there, but it has been grown there. It's going to be a completely different wine and structure. So for me, when I'm out looking at vineyards and sourcing sites, and now I'm actually sourcing sites because we're growing one of our Cabernet Franc programs, I'm actually looking for kind of those best places that are going to really match up for our Bordeaux blend, or if we're going to do something on its own. And those are two quite different conversations to have, right? So our DTC wine is going to be probably that west side tone, where I'm going to stick over on the west side. But we believe all of Paso has a place in the bottle, and I'm finding there's certain areas for Cab Franc that I really like. One being the Creston district, because you still warm up, but you get this nice 1 o'clock, 2 p.m. breeze mid-season that just kind of flows right through and settles it right back down. And it extends the growing season too, because I think with Cab Franc, you need a lot of hang time because of the pyrazines, because if you have a cooler summer, you're going to have that hang time to be able to get through that period. The other thing, obviously, is the soils. And when you talk about canopy management, I think you hit it on the head. In order to reduce those pyrazines, we've got to have good canopy management. If your soils are heavy, you're in there managing for the vine. If you have lighter soils, sandier soils, well-drained soils, the vine is managing itself and you have less inputs. I always look for less inputs. So I'm looking for the best match for the soils, for whatever that site is providing me. I want the best match for variety, so I don't have to go in there and touch it a lot.
That's beautiful. And I would say as a consultant, 1 hour of research before you plant is going to save 1,000 hours of labor.
Thanks for the Creston love, Stacy, because our wines are made in Creston. But exactly right, the AVAs back in 07, Paso is not Paso. When you say, what's Paso Robles Cab? We have 11 AVAs with elevations from 580 feet to 2,200. We have temperature swings of 25 degrees from hot to cold to 45 degrees hot to cold. We have vineyards 6 miles from the Pacific Ocean and vineyards 40 miles from the Pacific. We have 666,000 acre AVA. So the diversity that she talks about is right there. You have Willow Creek district, the Paso Robles Willow Creek, probably the coolest area in Paso. It's difficult in some areas to get Cabernet Franc properly right. And talking about your ripeness earlier, whether it's 25.5 or 27.2 or whatever your numbers are, we're looking at pH and acid. We're looking at balance. We're looking at color. We're looking at flavors. We're looking at tannin. We're looking at a lot of things in our decision-making process. Sugar is not the ultimate decision maker for us. It's balance, and that's what we go for, pH. And pH always rises, acid always drops as we're hitting, as Steve, those higher numbers, 26, 26.5, 27, and above. So the diversity across Paso is extreme, and that's what makes Paso, not just for the Cabernet Franc, but for all the varietals, a great area.
So one of the things we do at Lohr is we have a kind of a small army of Cal Poly students that join our team in June every year, and they're responsible for measuring vine water stress in all of our vineyard blocks. And so that involves, about 11 in the morning, they go around and they put little Mylar plastic baggies over some leaves, and then come back about an hour later and pull that leaf off. And the petiole is that little stem that feeds to the leaf. And anyway, they put the leaf down into this little canister and put it in this pressurized chamber bomb. Yeah, known as a pressure bomb. But if don't Google pressure bomb. You'll end up in Boston or yes. But you. So we're very intentional about our irrigation. So it's kind of that measure before you act or, before you input. And one thing that's really clear is that Cabernet Franc is very drought tolerant. And so it's a miser when it comes to water usage. We apply the same amount of water to a vine of Syrah, Cab Sauv, or Cab Franc. We kind of think of the Syrah as kind of like the Hummer, the gas guzzler. And Cabernet Sauvignon is kind of in the middle. And then Cabernet Franc, we refer to it as the Toyota Prius, because it's just, it gets a lot of mileage on a very small amount of water. So, there's a lot of opportunities for it because I think there's, an enthusiastic kind of consumer base and wine drinker base interested in the wines. But I also think it's quite compatible with sort of the macro environmental issues that we're facing as well.
Thank you. I love the perspective. One thing that I love to say in 30 seconds or less is the difference between pH and TA. pH is basically more about mouthfeel, and pH is basically a measure of hydrogen ion activity. So think about a 10-gallon fish tank, and you got 5 fish in it. pH is how fast the fish are swimming. TA is you pull all the fish out of the water and you weigh the fish. It doesn't change. The funny thing is you can take the same wine, add 3 times you're a bigger water in the chain. So TA is the weight of the acid in solution. When I heard that, it blew my mind and it changed my whole perspective on wine. So I wanted to share that. Last question for the panel. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see. Yep. Last question for the panel. What should our guests pay attention to, or what questions should they ask when tasting Paso Robles Cabernet Franc?
I think I would be asking where it would come from, for one. I talked about that diversity and most definitely that. The other thing I would say in Paso, honestly, is I turn around and look at the back bottle and see what that alcohol content was, because it's made so differently around Paso. It's pretty amazing to me. We tend to make some hot wines here in Paso, but when you get more of that balance, a little bit, just slightly lower, but everything in life is a balance, right? So I think it's that same thing. When I'm sitting down looking at any wine to taste or to drink, that's the first thing I look at, because as I've kind of evolved or become more experienced, I'm really looking for more of that balance. For Paso Cab Francs, absolutely the alcohol content and then where it came from, because it's going to give you these different depths and these different qualities that are going to come out of west side versus east side versus these sub-districts. So they're going to present very differently.
Let me ask you a difficult question. When you look at the back label, what is your dream ABV? To say, and it's just a freaking number.
On Cab Franc or Cabernet?
Just Cab Franc. If you said, if you saw it said, ooh, I'm going to probably like this one.
14.5.
14.5. So
You guys are getting alcohol to conversion ratios of about 0.6 up here, ish. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Well, I would say that the most important question you ought to ask when you taste a wine is, do I like it? Or do I not like it? And then the second taste or second impression would be, why do I like it or why do I not like it? Because at the end of the day, you're the one spending the money on the bottle of wine, and your palate is different than your palate and my palate. So the beauty of having all these different wines at different price points, at different styles, is that you get to make a decision. So I would say when you go out there to taste with your friend or whoever you're with, don't look to them to ask them what they think first. Come up with your own conclusions and look at color, look at structure of the wine. Ask yourself, is there any oak in this wine, or am I getting into Brettanomyces in the wine? I mean, ask yourself some questions and evaluate the wine based on where you're at with your wine experience. Some people will walk into my tasting room and say, well, I don't care for that wine. I'll say, what do you like? They go, well, I like White Zinfandel. I said, you came to the wrong winery. But if they like White Zin, go buy White Zin. So the whole thing is, you like it or you don't like it.
You know, I flunked out of winemaking school at Davis. I don't know if you know that about me, Wes. My degree is actually in chemical engineering. And so I tend to take all these questions in a very sort of technical way. You know, if I knew that the vineyard was planted after 2013, that would go in the plus column, because that's about the time when red blotch virus was being screened at the nurseries. This variety is very sensitive. We some of the worst wines we at Lohr, I as the winemaker, have ever made were from red blotched Cabernet Franc. Maybe another thing is, yeah, do you have two Cab Francs? One for the crummy vines or the crummy blocks, and one for the, you know, the top end. And I'm seeing Stacy's kind of nodding her head, because it is often that I don't think it's just at Lohr that, you know, about the best wine in the cellar is our Cab Franc, and about the worst wine in the cellar is our Cab Franc. And I don't know how you tease that out over a conversation at the tasting bar, but it is, you know, people talk about Pinot Noir being a heartbreak grape for growers. And the difference with Pinot Noir is it's, I think, 1 year to the next. The Cab Franc, I mean, once you kind of have these issues, it's the wrong clone in the wrong soil, the wrong rootstock, whatever the case may be, it pretty much lives with that vineyard block through its entire lifetime. And we've struck it rich in a couple spots, and then we've gotten it wrong in other spots. So yeah.
This is a conversation that you wouldn't get in a lot of wine regions. The honesty, to me, represents the collaboration that Paso represents, giving us a real view and an insider's view. It's sort of like we're in this room together to try to understand it, and I appreciate basically your honesty and everything that you guys have said. I'll close today with a quote from Henri Jayer, one of my great wine heroes, who said the fundamental problem of tasting wine is if I put one wine in front of you, the fundamental question is, do you like it? If I put two wines in front of you, the fundamental question becomes, therein is the problem. Every wine deserves an hour at table, two people in love, and delicious things. I hope you guys all had a wonderful time today. Thank you to the Cass Winery. Thank you to the Cab Collective. Thank you to all our Paso Cab Franc producers that you're going to be tasting. And don't forget to buy and support the wines you love out there. And special thanks to Nita and Kunal from LXV for putting in countless hours. Thanks also to Lori Budd for starting Cab Franc Day, and to Josh, the marketing manager at Lohr, who killed it. CJ, brand ambassador, as well as Joe Armstrong, Hope Family Wines, and Linda Sampay. Thanks, everybody. Get out there, taste some Cab Franc. If you're interested in staying in touch, ask me for a card. Let's definitely have a drink. If you've got Fernet, you gotta step up on me. So love you guys so much here at Cab Franc Day. I'll do Cardinal.
I know we've done this before, but another round of applause for us, for our esteemed panel. Thank you so much for taking the time. This is a grassroots effort. The idea was not to do a LXV event or Lohr event, Austin Hope event, but really a collaborative event. So I would request, please put the word out there, hashtag Cab Franc Day Paso. I want people to know what we are trying to do here. This is not about tasting Cabernet Francs. This is about putting the spotlight on Bordeaux in Paso. So watch out, a Merlot Day is coming very soon. Mira's going to work with us on that. We will proceed outside for tasting at around about 12. Oh, wow. I want to see if this can happen at home. And at 12:30, we're going to invite Chef Charlie, who has curated the pairings. He will come outside and he'll talk about the food and wine pairings. And because it's the husband, he always likes to have the last word.
The last word.
And we do want to remind you to please take a glass with you to the tasting outside. Thank you so much and enjoy yourselves.
And take the glasses home. Now that's the last word. Wes.